Hello everyone, welcome back to Long's Takes. Today we'll be covering something that doesn't directly have to do with my bread and butter of power scaling, but a subject that runs parallel to it, and at least for the sake of Dragon Ball discussion, is equally as important: canon. I have had several videos at this point that have covered and referred to different canonicities within the Dragon Ball franchise, and due to them not being the main point of these videos, they ultimately are not given the full attention that they probably deserved. In the future, when I'm talking about or comparing canonicities in Dragon Ball, I'm probably going to refer back to this video in order to save repeating myself. This video will function as a light history of canonicity in Dragon Ball, and help solidify what I mean when I say something is canon, isn't canon, or belongs to a certain canonicity. But always, with a franchise as large as Dragon Ball, I simply will not have all the answers and will probably miss something. With that all out of the way, let's begin. Releasing its first chapter, Bloomers and the Monkey King, on November 20th, 1984, for the first time the entire Dragon Ball story was consistent and self-contained entirely within the pages of Shonen Jump. There was not a single deviation or argument to be made about separate canonicity existing within the then brand new manga franchise. This remained true for a little under 2 years when on February 26, 1986, the first episode of the Dragon Ball anime was released, titled The Secret of the Dragon Balls. While this episode does follow the major events and story beats of its manga counterpart, the episode contains scenes and events that are never depicted as occurring in the manga. Goku's introduction is longer, and we see him running for more time in nature, like being chased by a saber-toothed tiger after running into Bulma. This also introduces the Pilaf gang significantly earlier when they were introduced in the manga, giving them a side plot that will run for the next few episodes to establish them as a presence earlier than the original series. This trend continued for the next 28 episodes, the plot being followed for the most part, with bits and pieces either being extended or added entirely. However, episode 30 reaches a new benchmark for the franchise, a series of episodes entirely consisting of brand new content that wasn't in the manga, or as fans might call them, filler episodes. For the rest of the original Dragon Ball, there would be mostly clusters of filler episodes between arcs, acting as padding of sorts between direct adaptation of manga material. Usually harmless, these stories purposely play around making any direct changes to the story being told in the manga. This cycle of having large clusters of padding episodes continue all the way through Dragon Ball Z, with the occasional episode thrown in the middle randomly for seemingly no other reason than it being possible to do so. Obviously, some of these arcs are fan favorite breakout events and characters like PyCon in the Otherworld Tournament or Goku learning to drive, while others are completely forgotten. Like, do you know who this guy is? Before we go any further, I think it's important to understand why all this supposed filler exists in the first place before we can get into the actual meaning of the big idea of canon in Dragon Ball. As explained in one of the Dragon Ball volume extras, Toriyama says the following: "From time to time, it would happen that people that I didn't even know were approaching me about the anime. Things were often said like, 'Oh geez, between the manga and the anime, you must never have any time to let yourself breathe.' In reality, I had hardly worked at all on the anime, and had put confidence in my collaborators. I had enough to do with just the manga. I didn't want to work myself to death, you know. For example, drawing an image of a movement in the manga is relatively simple, but to animate this image, you have to decompose the movement and draw all the intermediary movements. That demands a colossal amount of work. Of course, those who have read Dragon Ball have noticed that certain stories which are found in the anime don't exist in the manga. As one adventure in the manga corresponds to about 10 minutes of animation, and since one episode comprises of an average of 30 minutes, the entire series of Dragon Ball would have passed by very quickly. The team of animators therefore had to insert some original stories. I admire what they have done. It's hell of a job. Dragon Ball. It's the anime and the manga." Long-winded explanation aside, I think the biggest takeaway from this is that Toriyama had no hand in the production of Z other than making the manga it's based on. He considers any stories that are added just as much a part of Dragon Ball as his own work. Now, what I mean to say by this is that Dragon Ball does not have one single perfect timeline. Instead, Dragon Ball has several self-contained continuities that can be connected but are not the same. The manga itself is self-contained, while the anime and all of its filler are all self-contained as well. However, because the anime is based off the manga, any outside statements made about the manga should apply to the anime as long as nothing contradictory has been shown. But a statement about the anime cannot retrospectively be part of the manga because it could be an aspect that was added into the anime and not part of the manga's original intention or plot. In fact, for the most part, official material that covers continuity supports the idea that filler is canon within the anime. As mentioned in my cooler video, the Dragon Ball timeline in Daizenshuu 7 mentions very specific filler-only events like filler training, Goku and Chi-Chi's marriage, Goku fighting Pikkon, and Goku meeting the guy from before, Kung Kichi, all of which are entirely anime-only events. Making this distinction between Z's anime and manga being their own separate canons are really important when it comes to scaling, especially when the Buu saga rolls around. For example, if you literally take every statement about Dabura and Gohan's strength during the Buu saga from both manga and anime guides, nearly all of them will contradict each other, while Dabura simultaneously being weaker and stronger than Gohan. During the time of even early Dragon Ball's run, films began to be created that had plot elements or entirely new plots that had never been seen before. Oftentimes, these films were made to vaguely fit within a certain time period in Dragon Ball, usually running parallel to about what the anime was at the time. As I've said many times before, Toriyama considers these films as taking place in an alternate dimension from the main manga and anime continuities, even the films not necessarily taking place in the same timeline, same for a few examples in both cases. So by January 31st, 1996, upon the release of the last episode of Dragon Ball Z, the episode that lined up with the last chapter of the manga, the series had three major continuities: the manga, the anime, and the films, either as one weird continuity or several smaller separate ones. Things looked good, till literally a week later when the first episode of Dragon Ball GT came out. While these days it's pretty commonly understood that GT is its own separate story, at least from the materials I've seen that were available at the time, there was really no blatant indication of what role in Dragon Ball it had. Did it have Toriyama's best wishes? Did he write it? Is this the true way he wishes his manga to end? Why is Cooler here? It wouldn't get a complete answer until nearly a decade later in 2005 when Toriyama put a message on the box set of Dragon Ball GT's DVD release. Being a lazy bum by nature, I was absurdly happy when I managed to safely finish up Dragon Ball serialization and finally be released from deadline hell. The TV anime people wanted to continue just for a little bit more, but I just couldn't do any more of that. And so I left the Dragon Ball anime completely up to the anime staff, story and all. That was Dragon Ball GT. For GT, all I did was come up with the title, design the initial main cast and some of the machines, and also do a few images. However, I was able to rest easy handing things over to the excellent staff, who had continued on Dragon Ball for all this time. Dragon Ball GT is a grand side story of the original Dragon Ball. It'll make me happy for us to watch and enjoy it together. Now obviously from this we can see pretty blatantly that GT is a side story and not canon to Z. However, Z is canon to GT. Simply put, GT is the equivalent of a what-if fanfiction made by professional anime staff. Throughout this time and into the following decade, video games would be carrying a majority of the weight when it came to new Dragon Ball content. While many of these either just retreaded the stories of Z and GT with some bits and pieces of what-if content thrown in, especially games with like Supersonic Warriors 1 and 2 or the Legacy of Goku series. Still, none of these games have any influence on canon and remain their own separate stories. This has remained the trend with more modern games like the Xenoverse and Super Dragon Ball Heroes franchises. Things remained constant until around the year 2012 when it was announced that we would be getting a brand new Dragon Ball Z movie, which would eventually be known as Battle of Gods. Along with its sequel film, Resurrection F, for the first time ever, there were movies created with heavy Toriyama involvement, who in the past would only provide a handful of character designs for the film, if anything. Press releases made it clear that this was not a side story, and it was the first real continuation of the story of Dragon Ball since the last episode of Z aired. Such statements make reference to both the anime and the manga, and without contradictions either way, these films at the time were part of Z's anime and manga continuity simultaneously, despite the differences that may exist. I say at the time because almost immediately after Resurrection F's release, the Dragon Ball Super anime and manga came in and instantly replaced both of them, but instantly also created one of the biggest canonicity confusions in Dragon Ball history. The manga, written by Toru Taro, and the anime worked on by various artists, both were basing their series off of what would be known as Toriyama's notes, or essentially the outline of how he wanted arcs to go. For both teams, they had to figure out the rest of the in-between parts as long as they got his okay, sometimes getting slight corrections of their ideas. This raises the question, which is canon? And the answer is that they both are. What modern Super is now is just an extreme version of the gap between anime and manga that existed since the very beginning of Dragon Ball. The difference now is that instead of one being based off the other, they are both based off Toriyama's notes and inputs. This is why in the manga and anime, some characters exist that are the same and major events still occur, but the way things get there often differ. For example, Trunks cuts Fusamasu in half, which leads him to become Infinite Zamasu. However, both manifestations of Infinite Masu are physically different, and only in the anime does Trunks do anything with the Spirit Bomb. For the sake of simplicity, you can consider the Super manga the canon continuation of the Z manga, and the Super anime a canon continuation of the Z anime, because at least in Super we actually see animation that was used in Z. And once again, we entered a beautifully uninterrupted period of stability in what it meant to be canon. That is until late 2018 when Super Broly came out. While the Dragon Ball Super anime had ended, the manga was still running at this point and is still running to this day, which raised the question, what is Broly canon to? Promotional material at the time barely helped, simply saying that the movie was indeed canon but not specifying any more than that. However, the manga has shown us brief glimpses of how Goku and Vegeta versus Broly went in the manga, and they are noticeably different from the actual movie that we saw in theaters. All we know is that Blue Goku and Vegeta, without any battle damage, fought a Super Saiyan Broly in the ice, something that did not happen in the cinematic version. So what is the Broly movie canon to? The anime. While the Broly arc happened in the manga, it did not go the exact same way. And finally, we reach where Dragon Ball is today, and what I've said about superhero in the past still applies to how I see it now. Until we see when, if, and how superhero occurred within the manga, it is still a sequel to the Broly movie and the continuation of the anime timeline. As always, a manga guide or anime series reveal could turn all of this on its head, and I wouldn't have any real way to predict that happening. So when it comes to Dragon Ball, the major canons can be divided into 6 major pieces. They are the manga canon, which is the original Dragon Ball and Z run, and now the Super manga. The anime canon, which is Dragon Ball, Z, and the other animes, and the Broly and superhero movies. The GT canon and the Z sequel film timelines, which include both the Z anime and branch off and end at different respective places. There are the original movie timelines, which can either be grouped together or separately, up to you. All of them borrow from and are connected to the anime and manga to some degree. And finally, there is what we could call the miscellaneous canon, Dragon Ball franchises that tell new stories but are definitely not connected to the original story in any meaningful way. And that's where we are today. Did I miss anything? Disagree with my conclusions? Let me know. But that's all from me. See ya!